Still trying to wake up in my head.
Welcome everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Teresa Inglis. I am the Service Manager for Queensland Fostering Kinship Care, and with me today I have Helena and Darcy. We'll do some further introductions in a moment. I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which we're all meeting today. We're currently sitting in Turrbal and Yarraga people, and I want to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. And I want to also acknowledge all my Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues that are joining us today, and in particular Helena and Darcy, who have kindly come to QFKC's premises today to undertake this joint partnership. The reason we have really wanted to partner with Refocus and with the department today around delegated authority is because this is an emerging, exciting space, and we really want the sector to be fully informed in this place. And I had a session about, late last year, Helena, and I learned so much from that. And that has really enabled our staff here at QFKC to really support other carers' understanding and the sector's understanding when we're contacted. So we thought, well, how are we going to do that more? And the best way we thought to achieve that was through partnering with the department and a delegated authority to actually bring you a session on what delegated authority is. So this session today is being recorded, and it will be uploaded onto QFKC's website, so you can look at it at any time. I do want to let you know that because it is being recorded, I need people to be really mindful of confidentiality provisions. The chat function will be open, and I'll be working on that while Darcy and Helena are presenting. And I just ask that you please don't provide any identifying information around any children or young people or families that you're associated with in that chat function. So just really general questions, please. So now, I can be a little bit technologically challenged at times. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to hand it over to Darcy and Helena, and I'm going to minimise this so that you can see, so that we can see the slides. Can I just confirm that people, one, can hear us properly, and two, can you see the slides that are currently up? If I can just have some. So you're not going to be able to speak, or we can't see you. So all microphones, because this is a big session with over 100 people. Okay, so you can hear, but you can't see the slides. All right, so I'll just make sure. Okay, so can people see the slides now? Jenny, can you see the chat? Can you minimise? Just when I minimise it like this. So I'm just going to put it back up again now. You can see the slides. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm just going to minimise this, and I'm handing it over to Darcy and Helena now to begin the presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Carissa, and thank you very much for the invitation to come and talk to you about delegated authority. It is one of the things that I love to talk about, and it's part of my job, so I do feel very privileged. Can I also just acknowledge country and pay my respects to Turrbal and Jagera people here in the region, thank them for their ongoing custodianship, and also like to pay respects to our elders past and present, and acknowledge Darcy as one of our leaders in delegated authority, who has really blazed the trail for the rest of the state in this regard. So I'm Helena Wright. I am a Kabi woman from the Sunshine Coast. I have a connection through to the Gulf country where one of my great-grandmas was a stolen gem woman. She was taken from there and eventually moved down to Brisbane when she was about 12 when there was a domestic shortage here. And I'm a wife. I met Mr. Wright and married him. I am a mother, and in less than 4 weeks will be a grandma. So super excited. That's all I'm going to be talking about. That's all people will know about me, that I'm finally a grandma. And my job is the Executive Director for Delegated Authority in the department.
So, Darcy Kavanagh here, and good morning, and probably good afternoon and evening in the recording process, if you're watching a recording. So, myself, I'm the CEO of Refocus, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Corporation based in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and deliver services out towards Moreton Bay, Sunny Coast, Gympie, and a disability support service up in Cairns. So, we're kind of a small team too, we're about 120 staff at the moment, and kind of small but big at the same time, but not really big. And myself, I was born in Brisbane and raised in Brisbane, Wynnum sort of areas, and for the last 20-something years I've lived on the Sunshine Coast, but still kind of worked around Sunny Coast areas. And you know, I'm a father, married, have a wife who's one, and have 2 kids. So an 18-year-old that thinks he's a big man and growing into that adulthood, but he's still such a little boy and little teddy bear himself. And then I have a daughter who gives me plenty of sass. But that's what happens when you raise 2 very determined, self-determined children. And it's really nice to see that they can, they've basically, Refocus has been going 14 years. They've basically been raised in it. So that to know that I've got 2 children that are actually working in this sector now and actually learning from everything that we've done and the family's journeys, that they're working with their peers and helping to empower them as youth and to make different decisions for their life in the future. So it's great to sort of see that generational pathway happening already, and just they've had training since they've been in the womb almost, I suppose. But so it's just a little bit about me. And also my grandfather, he's from down in Bunjil country, Ingle, and so it's sort of northern New South Wales area that way. And my grandmother, we're still searching where her country area is from. We don't know where it's at the moment. That's me.
All right. Well, we thought we might, first of all, give an overview of delegated authority, the why, the what, and then a bit about the how. And that's where Darcy will be able to bring life to what I talk about in terms of sort of the process and the thinking behind delegated authority. And of course, we'd like to acknowledge all of our carers and the important work and the important role that they play. So we want to make sure that we cover off on all, as a carer for a child in need of protection. What does that mean in a delegated authority context? So we can talk about that. Happy for plenty of questions as well, so yeah, feel free to ask away. So the first thing we talk about with delegated authority is essentially the why. Why are we doing this? Why is the department embarked on this big reform piece? And why was our legislation, the Child Protection Act, changed in 2018 to enable this? Well, the simple answer is it's the right thing to do. We know that overrepresentation of First Nations children in the system is a significant challenge for the department, and we also acknowledge that we haven't always done our best work as a department with our First Nations children and families. So for delegated authority, it's grounded in self-determination, and that we can talk a bit more about how that is manifested, but really it's about putting the decision-making for First Nations children where the decision-making should be, and that is with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who know them, who know their families, and who know their communities. Thank you. So just some quick facts, because what we've found as we've gone around talking about delegated authority for the last 2 years is that there's a real difference in levels of knowledge around delegated authority, and I can, I guess, explain some of that in that we've only, up until the beginning of this year, had 2 organisations delivering delegated authority: Darcy's organisation on the Sunshine Coast in Gympie and Moreton, and who also works in Moreton Bay, and then CQID, which is Central Queensland Indigenous Development, who are based in Rocky and work in Emerald as well. So we've only really had those 2 organisations doing this for the last 3 years, and they're in one of our regions. So I guess, you know, people from outside the region who work with other organisations wouldn't have had any exposure other than what you've heard, and maybe, you know, what the department has talked to you about what is coming. So that's why, and reasonably why, people have varying levels of knowledge. But what delegated authority is essentially where the functions and powers and the accountabilities of our Chief Executive, so our DG, Deirdre Mulcairn, are delegated to the CEO of an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander organisation. It's always a case by case, so it's child by child. So it's not you know, all these children in the service centre are delegated. So, and that's how our legislation is written at the moment, that it is a child by child response, and obviously based on the needs of the child. Importantly, the decisions that our authorised officers make, so our CSOs, they can't be delegated. It's just the powers and functions of our CEO. The child must be Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander child. The decisions that the CEO make and the delegations that he holds, for example, that Darcy holds, can't be sub-delegated to somebody else in the organisation. In the Act it says that, I'm going to say the Act, that's our Child Protection Act, the views of children and parents must be taken into consideration before a decision is made to take on delegation. So in terms of the principles for decision making, the CEO has to abide by the Child Protection Act. They have to abide by other legislation as well, like the Human Rights Act. They have to abide by Information Sharing Act and everything that any other delegate of the department is required to abide by and consider when they're making decisions. The difference is that the decisions will be made in a culturally led, family-led, community-led way. So the practice looks really different, and the department doesn't want another child protection system set up in our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community-controlled sector that looks like the department. So you can see there that our paramount principle, which you will understand, is that 5A part of the Act, which is about that the safety, wellbeing and best interests of our children and the particular child that we're working with are paramount, both through their childhood and for the rest of their lives. Permanency, so we consider that delegated authority brings the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child placement principle to life. And you would also know that our legislation has been changed to embed active efforts as well. So now it's really the onus is on the department and also our delegated authority organisations to work in a way that is to an active effort around every decision. We need to obtain the child's views and support their self-determination, identity and connection. Thank you. So where are we up to now? Organisations Refocus and CQID started in late 2020. They work now with 6 child safety service centres. As of last week, we have a total of 197 children with delegations approved. 32 children have been reunified to their parents, and that's through the work of Refocus. And more children have had strengthened connections. So, and you'll see when Darcy talks to where our organisation started around working to strengthen connections. And that's because we know that our organisations are really good at that. We know that our organisations know families, we know they know how to find family, and we know they know the community connections. So that's been where we've asked organisations to start with. Having said that, this is a self-determining process, and organisations have really led the department in how they've wanted to grow from there. Because Delegated Authority is new, when I say new, as I said earlier, we've had the legislation in place since 2018. We've racked some action learning around this. So everything we've done around developing Delegated Authority, we've done in partnership with our Queensland Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Child Protection PIG, and they have run a number of action learning cycles. So what has been found out of that is really what is going to make this work. And what is going to make this work is the leadership across the department and the sector. It's about the it's a lot about the characteristics of the people involved. So having people being able to come to problems, come to challenges with open mind and open hearts and trusting, that we can work in a really partnered way around things that arise. And I can tell you that every day we learn of a new challenge. You will probably know our Child Protection Act is really prescriptive. And so, you know, we come up against things that challenge us all the time. So we work really closely with what's about our PIG and our Delegated Authority organisations. In terms of the action learning, the other thing we learned is that we need to take some time. So we need to take time to do this. And for me, this is a real tension, and I know Darcy feels the same way, and he is in it every day. So the tension really is we need to take time to get this right and do this well. But every day, a child grows up in care away from home. So, you know, that's a real tension in terms of embedding and growing Delegated Authority. Thank you. I did talk a bit about partnerships. Everything we do is really partnered. So we have strong relationships with our early adopter sites, Refocus and CQID. And there is a need to have partnerships at the local level, because while the CEO is delegated for a range of functions, it's not all of the functions that apply to the support needs of a child. So while Darcy and Jason, who's our CEO of CQID, are making decisions around things like family time, cultural connection and case planning, there's still other decisions that the department has to make. So there has to be real connectedness between service centres and our Delegated Authority organisation. So very excitingly, since the beginning of the year, we've had a whole range of new organisations start they've been funded and have started the work, the foundational work to deliver Delegated Authority. You can see there we've got 2 organisations in each region. In one region we have 3, that's Southwest. And you will notice, particularly if you're from Far North area, you'll notice that they're not on the list, but we have approved funding for 2 organisations in far north Queensland as well. So what this means is, and I guess it goes back to my point earlier about we've been working with 2 organisations in one region. Now we're really growing, and this scale up will continue to happen over the next 3 years. So what it means now with the coverage we have since the beginning of the year, that we're working in 17 of our 52 service centres across the department, across the state. And so that is almost one third of the service centres. When I say these organisations have been funded, and Darcy might talk a bit to this as well, is that it does take time to set up the relationship and the processes to be able to start taking on delegations. So that will happen over the upcoming months for the organisations you can see there on that slide. Darcy, do you want to talk a bit to the practice and?
Oh, this is American.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And so I'm not reading from any slides. So basically, I'll just have it as we go. And like Helen said, just type your questions in the question box if you have some. And then if it's too difficult, I'll just say I had technical difficulties and you probably didn't get to read it. Okay? But no, I'll answer them the best I can in that space. So a bit of the practice for us at Refocus is it's basically, where would I start? I think I'll start just in regards to some of our practice framework at Refocus. So a little bit of history about myself is I have experienced foster care myself as a child. So there was me and my 2 brothers placed in foster care in the 80s, and so 1984, and we were placed with just general carers in the Brisbane area. And we probably experienced that for about two years, and then we got reunified home to mum, but still with connections to child safety for 2 years after that, and then no more involvement with the department since. And mum's gone on to that I'm able to 10 children, so the other children have never come into contact with the department in that process. Now, so for me, it's always been about what a real family is. Experiencing what I experienced, hearing the story of how my brothers experienced foster care, they were younger than me as well, but the impact that foster care, or a decision that someone made to remove us from a person that we saw as our safe person, one of those people in that partnership wasn't a safe person. Sometimes they were, at times they weren't, but my mum was a safe person, and we were removed from that person to strangers' homes. And we didn't know who they were, and we didn't really get told that we were actually being taken away and placed elsewhere. I got told that we're going home to mum, and it didn't end up happening that way. So for me, it's like, okay, by making decisions, what's the impact long term? So I'm now 45, I'm still sitting there with decisions like behaviours that I've done, being hypervigilant, always looking for the safety plan, like the safety in regards to where am I going to go next. Even to the point where my family would go to the shops and I'd be home by myself, and I'd have this sad feeling around me all the time, and I had to dig and go, what is this feeling? Like, I'm cool for them to go to the shop. I was quite happy to spend time by myself. But what it always did is when I come back to what was it was always my first experience being placed in care with these strangers and sitting there and crying with my brothers around what's happening. And yet they were still playing as an adult. So for me, it's really, really, really important as us as an organisation, really think about the impact of the decisions we make now. And I usually link that to the acknowledgement that we hear often when we talk about acknowledging our elders past, present and emerging. And so for me, it's around when I'm making decisions, the decisions that I make now, are they worthy and from the people that walked before me? Have I learned from them? Am I making decisions and from their experiences and making it better than for the future generations? And then those future generations, when I'm gone and they're doing an acknowledgement, the things that I've done now, are they worthy of the acknowledgement of what we've done for them, and have we shifted it for them in their world? So when VA comes along and we have this delegation, obviously for us as the best practice is communication. You know, sometimes we know with speed and pace as communication gets lapsed sometimes. And when it comes to us, we get our referral and we have our conversations with the parents, we have our conversations with the children to get their views and wishes, carers, and most times when a referral comes in for DA, we have an FPP process or may be an FGM process. So every person that's significant in that child's life in that FPP process, we consider their views and wishes as well. And then a case plan is obviously made out of that FPP. And then it's for us as an organisation, because reunification is the goal, is then how do we stage reunification? And in order to do that, who are the people that we need to talk to come along the journey with us around reunification? So, and as I know, like carers, you know, do a great job, and I appreciate my carers and some of my behaviours that I had when I was in care, and to the point where I pack up my twin brothers and we're going to run off and take off on them. So I was waiting for them to be busy and ran away twice, and then the last time I had to do it all on my own. But and then got the behaviours I had when I returned home from contact as well. And so it's a lot to actually deal with. And because at that stage I didn't know why I was really misbehaving. But when I thought about it more and more later on, what I was doing was misbehaving because if I break this down, I can go home. Because that was all my goal, was that I wanted to go home to mum. And so when it comes to me making decisions, or my team recommending decisions around family time, family contact, and then progression to reunification, it is considering what the impact is in the home, so the behaviours that we're going to consider, and how to really support the carers, you know, that have got lives of their own, you know, and then we're dealing with these behaviours, trying to de-escalate them, and children sometimes don't really deal with change well either. So for us, we'll sit and actually map out what reunification looks like for us, and who resources the time. So like, there might be supported time, so this might start at supervised contact, as you may know it. And in that space, some of that resource, it could be a shared resource, so it could be a resource by us as the DA team, and it could be our staff members, or we could provide, you know, pay for a worker to do so, or it's, as the department does, it's use their CSSOs and or their external resources as well to do those things. And then also try and map out family members that can do those supported family times. And so basically from that point of view, we then obviously same thing. It's like there's some similarities in regards to the practice of it is the review points. So basically it's, you know, you'll have your 6-month plan of reunification, what it could look like. Here's the ideal goal, because, you know, it could be, say for example, let's talk about it's a 2-year order. So you want to be progressing through that and not actually, you want the kids home before the end of 2 years. But so it'll be about tracking where it is, but have review points and actually seeing how everything's going at that time. And the review points is with carers, it's also with parents, and it's also with the children. So a lot of time, you know, the children's voice, we hear it all the time, but it's like, well, how do we really bring those children's voice to the table? And sometimes it's a tricky one when when the children are worried, they don't want to upset mum and dad. And they don't, and sometimes too, they don't want to upset the carers. You know, it's some of that sort of divided loyalties. And so how do we actually bring that? So a lot of our work is also working on those children to actually honour their own voice and be okay with speaking their truth, and that we can support them through that. And so we've had some examples where the kids have been a little bit uncertain, but we've had them record a video of their voice and what they wish, and we've been able to play that. We've also had opportunity for them to just write a letter of what's there, but also too, they were happy for us to present. We've also had children in there, and they basically have kind of run some of their own decision making or meeting in a sense, and really driven what they want for themselves. And so, so with that process, and then obviously we continue on to the 12-month reunification point if we can, the 12-month or 16 months, something like that. But it all goes about, so the biggest thing for us is that sometimes some people have said reunification is really fast. And I think there's a couple of things that I ask the team to consider, and I consider myself, is as humans, we have a mindset of, we have a practice, that we run standards and ideals in our head, and we have expectations of people, but we actually don't verbalise them. And however, our behaviours are collecting evidence that people are failing our expectations all the time, and nobody's going to be safe enough to look after the children, and it's never going to work. And sometimes family would suffer, with their own people as well. And so kin carers, it's a little bit harder because sometimes you've known that person for such a long time, and sometimes we've built up a standard expectation that they'll never change, and therefore they should never have their children. So for us, it's about, well, how do we actually map that and actually look around? What's the real expectation to have? What's real standards and ideals to have? Well, what's my ideals versus the family's ideals? So we really look at the culture of the family, and I'm not talking ethnicity. We're talking about the actual practices of the family. What's their love language? What's their jokes? How do they talk to each other and communicate? How do they actually deal with stressful times and their struggles, and how do they build each other back up? And who do they rely on when they're falling apart and feel like no one's there? So they're the things that we've got to look at, because then we've got to coach and teach children to deal with adults in their world. Because moments that we're going to have these meltdowns as humans, as adults, and things, is how do we coach and teach these children to deal with big emotions and adult decisions and behaviours? And so some of that work that we do with our carers is actually sit back and go, okay, why are you really worried? Why are you concerned about these children going home? We do so. These are the things that we've seen. So we have a risk assessment. We actually evaluate. But also too, it's like, well, if this is the way they function as a family, it's okay. It's actually, no one's actually unsafe here. Most times too, the kids have been in the system too long. And sometimes it's just become a turnover of the same information, but not really a reevaluation of what the current circumstances are and what's really going well in the home. A big focus for us too, I suppose, and probably jumping a little bit there, is on healing. So sometimes it's our own experiences as well. And I have to do this, and I talk this as a manager, a CEO of an organisation, being abused physically by my stepfather, but then sexual abuse occurring as well in care. Everyone was an abuser, and so everyone has the potential to be an abuser in that space. So when I come into making decisions, straight away my walls are, hey, we've got to hold up. I've got to suss these people out first before I even let my children, even my own children, go to people. So no, I don't trust no one unless they're here and I'm there, kind of stuff. So that's my practice, as but what if I'm not aware of that? But that's just my behaviour. So for me, it's around digging around why are you really worried about these things? Tell me what it is. And there could be some connection to your own stuff that's creating blockages and protection, though, that you feel is protection for children. And then we work with that together as well. And because sometimes that's a journey in how we actually step up to be a real teacher to our children, that it's okay that, you can go home, you come back, you can misbehave or anything, I'm here for you. And this is how we're going to coach and deal with that space. And we talk to the children too about their plan moving forward. And we also let the children know if there's concerns, they can talk to us, and we can also slow that down if need be in that space. But what we also are about is the relationship after care. So if we did actually transition and was successful as children at home, it's what kind of support is the carers? Because depending the timeline in there, but you're still someone significant. Like I often think in my space, the people that are right for me in my world at the time, little did they know how significant that was for me. And it gave me peace at certain times. But as a kid, probably never really realised that. I could be a kid. I didn't have to protect my siblings and stuff like that. So for us, it's like, can there be respite, or can there be just a natural relationship with parents and with uncles and aunties? And for us too, reunification is not just about mum and dad. Like, mum and dad may not be able to do this reunification, but you know what? An uncle or auntie is being the parent as described in the Act and doing all the parental rights. It's like we could actually be doing reunification with kid carers or, with aunties and so forth. It's because, and that's all within conversation with the family too, around this, would that be your practice? And so, we've had a couple of carers that are really concerned about DA in the early stages. And we're really worried that all their rights and all their supports and all the, what do we call it, a commitment of, statement of commitment around this is how we would practice and work with carers. We were sort of thinking that was going to be on the wayside and go, no, it's not going to happen. But we're still accountable to all that commitment and stuff like that, but it's, I just lost my little point then. And so it's sort of, what was I just thinking? I just lost it.
You were just saying about how in the early days some of the carers
Yes.
were worried about DA and didn't know what sort of standards that you as a CEO might have to adhere to in terms of accountability.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that was actually pretty much so basically they were really worried about it. They were just going to make decisions, and then Ben was going to happen, and there was a key relationship there. And once we were able to communicate with them and actually show evidence, but remove the energetic charge though too. Like you have a mum with a standard and ideal against her daughter, for example, and this is the way you should be parenting. You should be this. I raised you better than that. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And so therefore, there's a little bit of energetic charge there. Well, I'm not going to do it because you're saying this, and so there's a bit of drama around it and stuff. It's like if we can actually remove that and see what it's really about, then that progression and movement forward for higher contact can happen as well. And so when we started talking and worked through with the carer around that, that was still a little bit reserved, like a little bit worried. But when we actually had family time unsupported and moved into reunification, it actually worked really well. And they were actually quite happy that they felt supported, but they also felt that it was actually a safe decision to go home. And they actually saw their daughter in a different light as well afterwards. So, and I think with all that work together, we can have those outcomes. But the reason we can do it a little bit faster too is because at the moment, we've got a fair few children, but beforehand in the beginning, it was that we had enough staff and we had our processes, but we also had a family support agency that we worked with that could do all the work in home with families. And so you have those out there, you have the wellbeing family support services out there, but we have that funded within our organisation. So we're able to work with that team to actually step up their support and actually go out more often and actually build on the case plan of getting those children from faster. So, and that was also really good for communicating back on how things are working for children and for families. And that's, I think it's a pretty long answer, right? Of how it all works. Hopefully you'll chuck up some questions in there to see if I've missed some things. But the difference, I think, is if I think about what's the difference of child safety and refocus, is one I just shared with why I practice the way we do as an organisation, and that's why we try and make sure that we deliver services like that. We're not just a big service system, and we're not going to duplicate that because the department processes and stuff sometimes is so big that it's a little bit clunky, it works a little bit slow, and we don't want to recreate that. And we've got, do we have? So it's just a little bit different is that, our focus, but the whole thing is reunification or connection, but also get this, so we work with families. The parents have decided that actually I'm not in a good space to actually have my baby. I want my mother to have the child. And we've been able to actually work that through with the family and have them make their own decisions amongst their own families and being able to place those kids in homes with carers at those times because that's what family decided. So for us, I think it's just probably more real on the ground that we're not overloaded as well with so much paperwork and so much meetings and all those kind of things. And what we want to try and do is if we can, we don't want to just introduce more and more people to one's life. The less people involved with your life, the better. And so if we can communicate through one person instead of having 4 or 5 come together and communicate that we will do that because in that way things can move faster as well. So but anyway, move on now. I think I've covered everything. Hopefully I've covered everything, but you guys can let me know and ask.
So I just have a couple of questions about these, just to clarify as well. So when we talk about the DG, currently Deirdre, or Karen, she has, so the list of names that you provided, Helena, including you, Darcy, that's Deirdre specifically delegating you authority, not Refocus as an organisation, but you as the CEO or Refocus. And when she approves that you as the CEO with delegated authority, what you talked about, Helena, was each individual case is a case by case. So Deirdre then has to give you authority for each particular child where a decision needs to be made. That's correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so let's say if we use an example that a family has agreed to delegated authority to you being a decision maker. Currently those decisions relate to family contact and reunification. So those are the delegated authorities that are currently in place. So you could start, for example, with a family saying, yes, we want you to be the delegated authority to make decisions in respect to family contact and connection with our children. And so you get permission from the DG to make those decisions for each particular child. And then you could talk to the family and say, we think that we can make more decisions. We think we can make the reunification decision of your family. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if the family agree to that, then you can go back to the DG and say, now we would like to be the decision maker for family reunification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can do that, and this camera's decided not to move, so I'm going to be the little man, the voice on the side.
Yeah, I can.
That's what I know. But so yes, that's correct. You can go back at those different points. But what we have done at Refocus is actually talk about all those opportunities in the very beginning stage. So then basically, oh, yeah. I don't know what happened. So yes, you can ask at each different stage for each delegation if you wish, but this is a good paperwork and a lot of time. So what we do is when we have conversations with families, we talk about all the delegations that we can do.
Yeah.
And are they happy for us to actually do all those delegations and apply for that?
Okay.
But at this stage, whilst resource rolls out, and like we're only 3 years into this, and so we're talking about case management, case planning at the moment around what that looks like. So obviously that comes with a bigger resource of time for our staff. So we can say, look, for example, how about all these 5 delegations that we'll apply for, and if you're happy for that, but so when it all gets done and comes over to me, it doesn't mean that I have to do all 5.
Sure.
I can say I could do the first one as approved contact or connection, but then the department will continue to do the other 4 for me at that stage. So that's good, and this is when Helena talked about communication and partnership together.
Yeah.
We've developed this with the service centre, so we know that when this comes through, hey, we don't have the ability to do these other things right now, but could you do them for us, please? Or continue to do them, not do them for us. And so then when we feel that we've got ability and capacity, then we say, okay, we're ready to do this piece now and this piece. We're talking to the family at the same time.
And in terms of the carer understanding who's making what decision, so carers are entitled to receive a copy of the case plan, so as it relates to the care that they provide the child. So I'm assuming that they will receive a case plan that identifies which delegations the delegated authority has, so what decisions you as the focus are making.
So there is a letter that we actually give. So we actually share that letter of each of the delegations that we do.
Yeah.
So it's like a standard letter that we deliver out to you according to what delegations they are. So and that's given to carers and family members as well for that, and also to the child.
And in your experience, Darcy, what has been some experiences that you've had where carers have come along on that journey and their support in that process has made the difference to that decision making being, going well to the child? Like what do you see the role of the carer being and how they can support that process?
I think so the roles. So when I think about there's one example that's in my head that there's been a couple maybe, but one probably is that a carer started to say, well, actually this kid can go home now, like everything's they're doing fine. Their kids are saying they want to go home, they're talking, and we're increasing time and stuff. And so the carers have moved into a space of how we're going to make this happen sooner. But all because the children's pace, like they were also seeing the children were ready and the family was ready. But they were also family carers as well, king carers. So they obviously, as a king carer, you do know a bit of what's going on behind the scenes versus 9 to 5. So I saw some of that progression. And the other part of your question though was in regards to, what was that?
So the role of the carer, like what, in an ideal world, if you were sitting down with a carer and saying, this is the role that you can play to support this to occur in the way that it's intended to.
Yeah, and I think that's when I talked about when our workers go out to talk to the carer, that's I think when the conversations happen and like really dig out like what are some of your worries around this. If it was to increase, what do you think we need to be mindful of for you as a carer? And and depending how much long that child's been in that carer's placement too, is how much they know of the child as well. And because what we might know of the child with mum and dad is different when that child's with a carer as well. So I usually say it's like when you're at uncle and auntie's house, the rules are different, you've got to behave a different way when you're there, and then when you're at home, it's a totally different set of rules again. As how do you work that between those two? You just do that naturally as a kid, right? So this is the same thing here, it's just, following that through with the carers, and then being there for the carers that need to talk and question it. There are moments where there's non-agreement. There are definitely moments where the carers are the decision, and the carers don't really like the decision. But when we do make a decision too, we actually have to consider is this doable for the carer? Not overloading the carer, but have to do all the work to connect and all that stuff too, because that's a lot of work in itself and a lot of commitment.
So what you described to me, Darcy, like all those principles that you're talking about in terms of going out and talking to the carer and listening to their worries and considering the load on the carer, like everything that you're talking about speaks to the statement of commitment and the consultation that you have with carers, and because they provide 24/7 care. So there might be things about the children that they know that resources might not know, and so the importance of actually that communication that you talked about at the very beginning, that carers should feel part of that process and be communicated with. So decisions, so I guess the question I'm asking, and I'm summarising there, but it should not be the experience, I guess, of a carer then to be told that a decision has been made without some discussion and consultation with them about that. And they might not like the decision that has been made at the end, but at least there's been some discussion around it and some, listening and understanding about why decisions have been made.
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of our core practice. And sometimes there's been little moments where we have, in the early stages, made decisions and we forgot to share with the carer and some stuff. And that's because we thought it was already communicated by the department and stuff as well. So we had to just make sure that our pathway through was what was our checks and balances, make sure that the carers were informed. And also too, with the decision, some of the placements were, a decision was that the department either communicated to the carer and Refocus would do the work and communicate. So once again, limiting people going to their home and so forth. So some of that was also a loop in that arrangement. But it's also about who has best relationships as well. And sort of too, like the carers, we also have fostering kinship care support service within our agency as well. So our DA team also talk to the support worker that goes out to support the carer. So that sometimes is that communication point there and not the other. So a DA worker may not even need to talk to you after the first visit of what your views and wishes and all those kind of things. Only a review points maybe that you want, but it's up to, the carer can say yes or no. If they want, but also too, we go the same day sometimes, so then that way it's, not multiple appointments and make it all on one day. So, so that is the best practice, the way we want to do it. And sometimes, just be generous, if we get it wrong, it's hard. Well, sometimes staff just feel they need to get stuff done beforehand, they sometimes forget. But that is our best intentions to do it all that way.
And you just raised a really good point, Darcy, in respect to the community control organisations, that there are different arms to those organisations. So you look at the delegated authority arm, but you have foster and kinship care services also emerging in these community control organisations.
Yep.
And so you might be a carer attached to a foster and kinship care service that is with a community control organisation, and you are getting your support as a carer through day-to-day support in respect to meeting the needs of that child. Separate to that, you will have delegated authority as another arm to the community control organisation. So what you're saying, Darcy, is they're separate services, but they of course will communicate and work together. And, you know, the delegated authority workers may speak to the foster and kinship care worker to, you know, gather information, but it's very separate.
Yes.
And you are the decision maker still. So
yes, absolutely.
You've got people that will be coming into your home as carers, and they'll be talking with you and they'll be gathering information, but ultimately, if there's delegated authority in place, that goes back to one person within that community control organisation. We'll refocus that as Darcy, and he would be the one that would connect.
Yeah, and so basically for my team, like they'll do all the work. Like I wouldn't have enough time to do everything.
Yes.
But then they come back to me and say, hey, this is the pathway so far, this is what's happening, this is our recommendation, we think this is what the best way forward is. I consider that information and agree. And then yes, I agree with that process, and then we enact. And then I might just evaluate different pieces in there, or request those like, well, actually, I want to actually see a little bit more time here. And, you know, it's not, same thing for me at one stage that I have to make a decision because the order was ending. And it was like, do I actually reunify this child or not? Do we extend the order and so forth? And so it was like, it was D-Day, like we had 4 days out to make that decision, and it eventually came to a really good decision and everyone was okay with it. And so it's all worked out really well so far. Like I think there's been a little roadblocks, but we've worked them through.
And as a delegated officer, so if we get into where decisions are not agreed upon, you as a delegated authority take on the role that would otherwise be the delegated officer within the department. So for a contact decision, that would be the senior team leader would be making contact decisions, but as the delegated authority, you are making that contact decision. So that's still a reviewable decision for family. And you would be the person that would be then sitting in QCAT, supported by court services to speak to. Have you had that situation?
I haven't had a situation because I don't want that situation. So, and that's why our practice is to avoid that, right? And so if we communicate, work really, really well on this, we can agree and disagree. So far, that's what we've done. We disagree, but we're just going to go this together. And so far, it's all worked out really well for us. But there is going to be a moment where it may not, you know. But so absolutely, it'd be me sitting there in Brazil, and doing the QCAS that needs to be.
And I think part of why you've been able to agree to disagree is people understand that this is in the best interest of the child, safety, and the risk and everything you've assessed is, you know, people are happy.
Absolutely.
We've got some questions here. I just want to ask just do one further point with you, Darcy, and I want to raise this because there was something that you said to me online when we were preparing for Or's webinar, and it's really stuck with me, and it's certainly a message that I put in my training around family contact as well. And that is that we have to teach children how to be safe around their family. And there are going to be times where they're disappointed by family or disappointed by community. But that's how we build resilience, and that's how we build what is, what is life. And if we don't prepare our children for that, and we try to protect them from everything, then one day they are going to have to navigate a relationship without the support services around them, and that could be really dangerous.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing in our mindset all the time too, is as carers, we can come and go. You know, something might happen and we're out of the child's life, and then where do they go? So where's family? So whereas, like you said, once they turn 18, what happens to those children? You know, not all kids stay with their carers, then they're out in the big world, and then they're going in and then having to learn their family, you know, at that age. Whereas, and that's what I talk about is if we do this now, know what the culture is of the family, and we coach that, exactly what you're saying, nurture that all the way through, they then don't feel ostracised in their own family. Because we've had that case happen on the Sunny Coast. These kids have been in care for a long time. Contact wasn't, or, you know, connection with family wasn't happening, but they were in the same suburbs. And even the families say now, we don't know them. They're actually not like our family. And so those boys, those children, they actually really like being at home. But also too, some works have come up that they don't really feel connected either in that space. So like, how do we do that together? And it's difficult because too, when you have the children say, "I want to come home now from family time," it's like, well, okay, this is a little bit messy now, like before they was had. If we did this earlier, would it be a different story? Because they wouldn't be feeling so different in that space with their family. But there's the things that we just consider around decision making and what it looks like. And it's a hard decision when you're putting your time and effort into care for someone and a child of that, like, show love and energy into there. And then it's like, what if it's like, you know, you're handing them back to an environment that was supposedly unsafe for them. That's why they came to you in the first place. So like, there's a lot of emotion there too. So again, I think for us, it's really important that we also hear that emotion and honour it, but also to coach and support people through it in that space.
And recognising that in particular those teenage years where we know that young people are going to want to reconnect with their family and it's a feeling like they don't belong here where they've been cared for because, you know, they're disconnected from their community. But then they go back to community and they don't feel that they belong there because they've been out of there for so long. You've then got an adolescent that doesn't feel connection anywhere, and that can be a really dangerous place to be. So that's really
I see that question up there just in regards to DA focus on reunification. So one of the key things is that the order is reunification and stuff. So that's why it is heavy focus on reunification. But there is moments, like I think the one I mentioned earlier, where we came to a determination that even the mum herself said, "I'm not ready." Yeah. And then the decision was that kid stays there. And there is going to be conversations a little bit later around what does it look like long-term wise for that child. Some of our thoughts are, and have done, is can we do family arrangements? Can we get family law court orders in place instead of actually child protection orders in place? So then that way child safety doesn't need to be involved in families' lives and that journey changes, you know, for them. But there are some children that are in long-term guardianship orders that we've actually been a part of in delegation of authority. And what we've been able to do, you know, some kids, now I'm talking just for some kids that they've been in the system and family connection hasn't happened very well, but we know there's been family out there. So, and then children are asking to see their family, and we've been able to reconnect parents with their children and set up family time in that space. But there's also pieces of, so when it's long-term guardianship to the chief executive, when we do the review of the plans, it's around view the wishes of the children again and the carers and where they're sitting, and then it's about do we support extra, like, we family map and look for other family members that might be around that can be connected in. You know. So when it is long-term orders, it's depending case by case what it looks like and what their storyline has been, their child protection storyline, and has it been one of those things where people are just not contacted and brought people in, whereas actually you're reconnected and like, yeah, I've been wanting to see my children for all these years, you know, but no one ever told me and stuff. So, yeah. So, do the carers contact the DA? Yes. So if we are the delegated authority for those children, you can contact us around some of the decisions.
Yeah.
Well, because, if there is, say, for example, a family support agency, if they're doing the family support, supporting the contact, then they can contact the family support agency and talk to them about some of the, you know, you can talk about the day-to-day pickup stuff, like arrangements for contact and all those kind of things. But in the other side of things, if that's not there, you can talk to the DA person going, hey, these contact days aren't going to work. Kelly, please shift these around, are you able to get back to me and we can map those things out. So,
And that's where it can be a really advantage for carers that have got a delegated authority in place to actually be attached to the fostering kinship care service within that same community control organisation, because then there'll be that transfer of information.
yeah.
I did see a question which I'll quickly go to. There was a question about choice for carers and whether they have to go to a fostering kinship care service that is community controlled. The answer to that is essentially carers should have choice as to where they are, which agency they are supported by. However, when there is a child that is subject to delegated authority, a carer will need to work with that community control organisation and that delegated authority. So they don't have to be receiving any fostering kinship care support through the service, but they have to be working with the delegated authority section around that. And just looking at the advantages that we've talked about today, that if you are caring for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and there is delegated authority in place, then there'll certainly be lots of advantages to being attached to those fostering kinship care services that are within that same organisation. So can kinship carers get help from your service?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends what kind of help though first. So DA-wise, yes, if you have questions about delegation of authority and you have children under, the authority has been delegated to us, then you can contact us and we can talk about how that all works for sure. And then obviously too, if you're a carer caring for Aboriginal children, does our foster care program actually have room for you to be able to be a part of our team there? Yes, absolutely. That's also available there. And then we've got a community kinship care, so CKC, instead of FKC, but those workers then can also help you as a carer, as all support agencies would.
So does the expert carers currently in your region that are listening to this and delegated authority is not in place, say we've got a kinship carer online and they're looking at this and they're caring for an Aboriginal child and they think, I want Darcy to be making the decisions for my grandchild, who do they contact?
Yeah, so they can call our team straight away, can call our DA team and talk to our team leader or one of the DA team members there, or even the service centre and ask them to send a referral through. So referrals for us for DA can come through from the parent or the child or a family member. And then we actually have those discussions and child safety can do as well. So we have those discussions then and determine capacity and how we're going to be able to serve, because we don't actually want to deliver a service that's got a quality standard, you know what I mean? So if sometimes, and it's once again capacity work-wise and determining how active families are in their case plans as well.
We've got a question around Capalaba. I know the YB is in Capalaba. We're doing initial assessment training with them on the 10th of April, so they're certainly a community control organisation that has been reaching out to KC for training. So where are they at in their journey?
Yeah, so for our sort of expansion plans have been setting up, and we've taken our lead from our community controlled organisation. So they've talked to us about what's their aspirations around delegated authority, taking it on, when, where, and also are you wanting to take on family time, cultural connection, move to reunification, those types of things. Yuli Baraba at Capalaba has just recently taken on their fostering kinship care, so they want to get really good at that. Yeah, and I think they'll think about delegated authority into the future. Yeah.
Is this forum just for children who are on reunification orders? No. The delegated authority relates to any child, so you can have a child on a long-term guardian CE order, and delegated authority could be given to a CEO, for example, in respect to family connection. But then it could also be given in respect to reunification too, if that family connection starts to look as though reunification is an alternative.
And our DA also have a strong focus on cultural connection. So there might be situations where children will never be able to be reunified to mum and dad, but our orgs really want that connection, both to broader family, to kin, and also to, cultural connections. So spending time working with them around working with carers and the families around cultural connection. So, yeah.
And can you get the child back to a kinship carer? I think certainly what you were talking about earlier, Darcy, is doing that mapping to see, and particularly if children are placed in non-Aboriginal placements and that there is a kinship family member available, then that would be certainly that mapping that you would.
That's right. And that's a decision to be considered. And it's like doing, have that child removed from one placement, then go to kin because we've identified and mapped it all out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to go upstairs with any of the questions. Okay, so we've answered all the questions that are currently up there. We've got still a little bit of time. If anyone has any further questions, you've got such great brains here that can answer any of the questions that you have in this space. So any other questions that anyone has, now would be your time to write those up. This session, like I said earlier, is going to be uploaded onto QFKC's website and, will be available. And so all the fostering kinship care services that are online today, I really encourage you, when you are going out and you're doing home visits with carers, particularly carers that are caring for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, that you actually provide them with a link to this session and support them to watch that and answer any questions that they may have over that. Because what we want to achieve in this space is we want the right information being shared and we want accurate, timely and consistent information. And I think already QFKC is a statewide service. So some of the information that we're hearing from different pockets in respect to delegated authority is just completely inaccurate. Which is why we wanted to put the session on today, because it's really important that you hear what delegated authority is from a department perspective, but also from a community-controlled organisation's perspective. Okay, so I can't answer the question. Sure, Judy. So we have an on-call service here at QFKC. If there's any, and that's a good point, if there's any particular matters that you want to speak about that are specific or child-specific, you can contact us on 3256 6166. There's my New Zealand accent coming through. I'm sure when they chose that phone number, it was so I'm just putting it in the chat function. So that's QFKC's contact details. You can contact our office and speak to an on-call worker. And if we don't have the answer, then we'll reach out to Helena and Darcy and just ask their information.
There's a question, Carissa, just about Fund on Queensland and when it's going to start in Cairns. So we have funded 2 organisations, but they won't be working in Cairns. One of them will be, so at this point in time, so one will be working with the community in the Cape, and then one will be working in the Torres Strait. So we'll be in Cairns in late April, and we'll be having that yarn with our community organisations up there about when are they ready and want to take on delegated authority. We spend a lot of time talking to organisations' boards because the board has to be comfortable with the CEO and the organisation taking on this. It really, it is a big thing. It's statutory child protection decision making. So we do spend a lot of time talking with the orgs, getting them ready, and also the other part of it is we have to have our service centres ready as well. So a big part of this is about letting go of the power around making decisions, and that's easier for some people than others. So, we spend a lot of time doing readiness in the service centres as well.
So there's just a decision, a children's using which is paramount in decision making, particularly children 12 plus. I think that's probably a case by case scenario. I mean, certainly when we're looking at the framework of the Child Protection Act, there's many different principles that the department and or delegated authority need to take into account. So that's the paramount principle, it's all the general principles, it's the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander placement principle and core principles, and of course 5E, which relates to children's views and wishes. So I think, would you agree with that there is a whole range of things that are taken into...
Absolutely. Yeah. And like we had she's 14, maybe 15-year-old, and we reunified. There was 5 children reunified with mum, and she was the 6th one to be reunified. And at that stage, she was wishing she didn't want to. And in that space of time, eventually she did. But what we had to consider is, like, what was her real reason? Like, she was actually living in a residential, and we had to really get to know why it is that she wanted to take so much longer to get home. And because we could see that home was safe, mum was looking after us. The perpetrator of TB, for example, had passed away, so then there was no more risk of that. And all the other children were happy at home. And so it was like, okay, was that because, considering a whole number of things, was it because what was happening in her home, she liked to live there? Was there a sense of freedom? Was there having to go back and look after all my siblings? And, and then was there legitimate fear? Like, let's say there was some fear in there around people might come knocking on our doors again, and even though it's a new house and stuff, but it was the fear sitting there. So it was like, how do we actually address some of those fears? But then too, as an adult, we have to make decisions sometimes for children, because they still have child brains. They're not actually fully developed to cause some consequences. And then obviously all the research you got to consider as well as when they turn 18 and they seek out their family members and all those things. So yeah, multiple things are considered in that. And it's not just like, okay, just because the child says that, that's what's going to happen. And yes, and all those other things are discussed. But absolutely, we do consider it and then see if there's other ways around it too.
And I think when we talk about the paramount principle, one of the really crucial elements that was added to the paramount principle in 2018 was that the departments and the delegated authority now cannot just consider the decision for the here and now. They have to think about what that decision means for that child for the rest of their life. So they have to be thinking, when they're 19, when they're 20, when they're 21, what is the decision that I'm making now, and how is that going to impact on them? So I think when we talk about paramount principle, that is the paramount principle, and all of the other principles help us to make decisions. But we definitely, and I think that was such an incredible add to the Child Protection Act, because it made us really think about, yes, attachment is really important for this 2-year-old that's been with this carer for 2 years, but they've got another 16 years in care and then another whole lifetime beyond that. So how do we hold that attachment and understand that, but also make decisions that we know are going to impact that child for the rest of their life. So we can't just think about the here and now.
And it goes back to the point that Darcy made at the beginning about the legacy of decision making.
Yeah.
So what are we doing today in everything we think about, write and say, and what is the impact that's having on a child now? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, even, in the part of the department I work in, we respond to requests from adults who've been children in care. We've had a recent one from, a 70-year-old. And so, it's, as you say, whole lifetime of parenting. Yeah.
So can the DA make decisions around health and well-being?
Yep. So depending on the delegation, we can make those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of our new delegated authority organisations like Darcy's do have, are our big health providers. So we have Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Community Health Service here in Brisbane, Calvin, down on the Gold Coast, who are already working with the children in, that's where they go to the doctor, that's where they go to the dentist, go for their needles. So, it's a really nice alignment.
It's a question around whether I can put the link into the chat function. I will try my best to do that. If I don't succeed in that task, then please be sure that if you just go onto QFKC's website and go to the training tab and click down on that, then it will be available. Probably not for a couple of days, because we'll just need to get that ready and get our business support officer to upload that. Any final questions? I think we've got another question. Oh, that's a thank you. You're so welcome. Any other final questions before we wrap up today's session? That's it.
Going once.
Going once, going twice. It's always very hard talking to a computer. Look, I just want to take this time to really thank Helena and Dusty for coming out. I had been stalking you for a while to get this session because I just knew how incredibly important it was to get the right messaging out there in respect to delegated authority. And today, I just love listening to you today, Darcy, about your story, but also what's led you to be in the position that you are and how you hold those decisions and the role that you take so incredibly importantly.